Join me as we explore what makes Wunderkeys unlike any other piano method on the market, and if its unique design and approach is worth a try. Hey, if we haven't met yet, I'm Phoenix and I'm the Tattooed Piano Teacher. I discovered Wunderkeys years ago and I've slowly been incorporating it into my piano method rotation since then. By the end of this video, you'll see what makes Wunderkeys so unique in its design and approach, and stick around to the end to hear when and for whom I pull Wunderkeys off of the shelf. If you've seen any of my other piano method book videos, you know that I have 10 categories for comparing piano methods series. And it's these 10 categories that we're going to use to compare Wunderkeys to other piano method book series. The first category is pacing. Pacing describes how quickly new concepts are introduced, how often they're reviewed, and how quickly these songs get more difficult. So the pacing of the Wunderkeys piano method books is quite slow. New concepts, positions, notes are introduced quite slowly and reviewed a lot before they move on to the next concept. Now, the word slow has a negative connotation, but a lot of piano teachers who have used this series claim that their students are now better note readers than when they were with a different piano method book series. Now, quick disclaimer, this video is all opinion and personal experience. Other teachers may have a different opinion or a different experience with these method books, and that is totally okay. The next category we're going to talk about is positions. In the primer level book 1, students stay in one position the entire book, and that position is thumb share C or middle C position. In primer book 2 and 3, students stay in the C pentascale. It's not until elementary level 1A that students are finally moving their right hand, but they're just moving it up an octave to treble C scale. And then at the end of the 2A book, they are finally introduced to the G scale. Now, there is much debate about this topic. Some teachers feel that there shouldn't be 2 songs in a row that even have the same position, and other teachers like the stability of keeping a student in a position for a long period of time. So no matter what your opinion is, I think this approach is very helpful for just the right student. So stick around to the end, I'll let you know who I would assign these books for. And there's one exception to the rule, and that is there are move and groove pages in the primer and elementary level books. These are pages that are dedicated to having students sort of solve the puzzle of where one of their hands is going, which will be in a different place out of the position. Next, let's talk about notation. Like most piano method books, the Wunderkeys books start off with off-staff notation, and they start on the black keys. The difference with Wunderkeys is that they have what they call a Wunder staff, and this is 2 lines that sort of emulate the staff as they're introducing the notes. And the idea is that this is going to make it a better transition once the staff is introduced, which happens halfway through the primer book 1. Now, here's where Wunderkeys is truly unique. Unlike most other piano method books, Wunderkeys does not use a guide note approach. What I mean by a guide note approach is most method books will introduce landmark or guide notes that are kind of far apart from each other, and then they'll fill in the blanks in between them. Instead, Wunderkeys introduces middle C and then mirror image by step, D and B, E and A, and so on. And in that, Wunderkeys reviews commonly mixed up notes, like D and B. Now, there is a lot of debate amongst piano teachers about this. Some are all about the guide note system, and then others are happy to deviate from the standard a little bit. In my personal experience, the guide note system will work with older students, but with younger students, I find that going consecutively and taking time to review commonly mixed up notes works much better with how the younger mind processes new information, particularly notes on the staff that can look so similar to each other. So personally, I have really been appreciating this approach for the right student. If you're interested to read a little more in depth on how notes are introduced and later key signatures in the later levels, then check out my blog post, which is a more in-depth Wunderkeys review, link in the description. Next, we're going to move on to theory, and there is no theory workbook to go along with the Wunderkeys series. There are mini assignments within the sort of all-in-one lesson book, but they are pretty sparse and not very involved. There are supplementary workbooks published, but they are entirely focused on note naming and drawing notes, and so there isn't really like a comprehensive theory method to go along with the Wunderkeys. Their website does have a lot of free printables. Most of these are pretty light on the theory side of things. They might be like a game or a coloring activity or something like that. Once you get into the level 2 and beyond in the elementary and intermediate books, then theory becomes a little more incorporated into how things are introduced. However, there still isn't really a written assignment regularly introduced in the lesson books themselves. Let's talk about technique. Now, again, the primer books are really focused on learning to read notes, and it is a little bit one-sided in the early levels. So they have pages called Practice on the Pathway, which I believe are intended to be like little technical exercises, but really they just turn into short sight reading assignments. In my experience, they're like 2-measure, very short things. They have some dynamics, and later on in the elementary levels, you might get like a hand move or something like that, but they are not like heavy on the technical skill side of things. In the elementary level books, these pages, the name is changed to technical exercises. And again, they're sort of technical exercises, but they sort of become like a sight reading assignment. In the intermediate levels, on the other hand, technique is really emphasized, and also in like the later elementary levels. So scales and chords are heavily introduced, reviewed, and there are like scale etudes, and it does get technique heavy on the later end. So all in all, I feel like Wunderkeys has this philosophy of sticking with one thing until it's mastered before introducing something new. If you found this interesting so far, go ahead and hit that like button so I know to make more piano method book related content. Next, we'll talk about the levels, or like the overall path that this series will take you through. So there are 10 levels in the Wunderkeys main series. There's the primer level 1, 2, and 3, elementary 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, and then intermediate 1, 2, and 3. There has been talk about releasing an intermediate level 4, and if you're a fan of the Wunderkeys intermediate levels, then go ahead and subscribe to this channel because I will for sure let you know as soon as that new level comes out on the scene. By the end of the intermediate books, students will be at a late intermediate level with an emphasis on a particular style. And that style I'm gonna call like a modern, maybe new age, maybe neo-Celtic style of playing, which is sort of heavily introduced in the later elementary and intermediate level series. So by the time a student graduates from all of the Wunderkeys books, they will have the technical skills needed to play jazz or classical music at, let's say, maybe an intermediate level. However, they wouldn't have been officially introduced to the jazz standards or the classical standards through this series. They would, however, have had a lot of experience with the sort of modern piano solo style that the composer, Andrea Dow, is so adept at composing in. So if you have a student who likes this style of playing, they will really thrive in the later levels of this series. Let's talk about the aesthetics of Wunderkeys. Open up any Wunderkeys book and you're going to notice an immediate difference. There are full color pages. Every page has different colors. The primer and elementary levels have comics and characters. The characters, especially in the primer level books, are so adorable and lovable, and your students will absolutely fall in love with them. There are even games included in the lesson book of the primer levels. I feel that this series has been expertly designed with kids in mind, and it really appeals to their eyes and their imaginations. One thing I'd like to mention is that the primer level books do not have page numbers in them, and this is an intentional decision by the author, but personally that doesn't work in my studio setting, so I just write in the page numbers before I give it to the student. Okay, next let's talk about song selection. So this is a big one. So I want to talk about the songs that are in the primer book 1, 2, and 3. These songs are really short and they just don't really sound like anything. Let me show you an example from primer book 1, 2, and 3. So as you can see, most of the songs are 4 measures or 8 measures, and melody-wise, there isn't a whole lot to grasp onto. In fact, some of my students have trouble knowing if they played the right rhythm because the song just doesn't really come together, whether they play the right rhythm or not. However, again, this goes back to that emphasis on note reading. So these songs will get your students reading the notes correctly so that later on they can play more interesting songs. So it is a different approach. Now, I do want to mention the supplementary books that are available at the micro levels in the primer, and there are some in the elementary levels as well. The supplementary books have 2-page songs in them. They introduce more adorable characters and stories, and the songs are a little more recital worthy. So I do like to pair one of her supplementary books with the lesson book, depending on what level the student is at. As you move into the elementary level books, 1A and 1B, the songs start to get a little more interesting. We've got 1-page songs, so let's hear an example from level 1A. And then as we get into the level 2A and 2B, the composer's style starts to shine through, and we get some really good songs in these. And then check out a song from the level 1 of the intermediate series. So my take on the song selection is, if you can weather through the primer level, sort of short, doesn't sound like anything songs, you can get to some really good selections in the later levels if you and your student appreciate this particular style of composition. So how much do the Wunderkeys books cost? Any of the main core lesson books will cost $13.95. If you wanted to add one of the note writing or note naming workbooks that I mentioned, those are $8.95. And the supplementary books that I mentioned, those are $11.95. So because it's an all-in-one series, you can get by with $13.95, but if you get those add-ons, 3 books will cost you $34.85. Now, as far as availability goes, you can't go down to your local music store and pick up the Wunderkeys books. You can't get them on any of my favorite discount websites for sheet music. You can only get them on Amazon.com. They don't usually go on sale, but the price is what it is because it's literally the only place that they are available. Now, you've stuck with me through all 10 of the categories. Let's talk about when exactly I pull Wunderkeys off the shelf for a student. Number 1 is if I have a new student who is age 4, 5, or 6, perhaps 7. With this age group, the slower pace of the methods, the adorableness of the characters, the games, the comics, I know that this student is going to fall in love with piano lessons if I gave them the Wunderkeys book to start their piano journey. The second time I would pull Wunderkeys off the shelf would be if I have a student who's in another method, but they seem to be needing a little bit extra help with their note naming. So for instance, if I have someone who is struggling with those bass clef notes, I know if we take a little detour into the Wunderkeys primer level book that suits their level at the time, they're going to come back to their other series with better note reading skills. The third time I would take Wunderkeys off the shelf is if I have a student who is kind of losing interest. If I find that they're having trouble being motivated to crack that book open at home, then switching over to the Wunderkeys series can really make a difference. The first thing they're going to see when they open up the book is a game, a comic, a cute character, an imaginative story. So that can really sort of re-spark their interest in their piano books and getting them to practice at home. And the fourth time I use Wunderkeys a lot is in my partner and group lesson settings. Something about the way this book is designed and laid out just makes it perfect for partner lessons, or I teach small groups with 3 students at the same time. The comics and the games are even more fun when you have a partner with you to enjoy it, so I do use these books a lot in those settings. Now here's where I need your help. I want you to comment below a piano method book or method book series that you would be interested to learn more about. So I'm looking for ideas for future piano method reviews, so give me your suggestions in the comments. And if you want to keep watching, this method book series is what I consider to be the most underrated piano method book series for young beginners, and I just bet you've never heard of it. So check that out here, and I'll see you there.